And we're back in the car on a Saturday like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of this rainy, miserable Saturday morning here with me in New York. But once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. 33 years, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, shapes, sizes. 33 years since yours truly graduated from Massapequa High School. June 28th, 1992, the campus of SUNY Farmingdale. And that was a day with a lot of conflicting thoughts, feelings, emotions, but the overwhelming memory is how scared I was. I was afraid from every angle, in every possible way, because I did not know where I was going. And if it were a movie, let's say The Graduate, Dustin Hoffman, his character graduates college, and then he is almost literally lost at sea. He is adrift. He doesn't know what he's going to do with his life. And there's a lot of metaphors, but he literally doesn't know what he wants to do with the rest of his life. In my case, I was lost in every possible way. I really was. There was no cliche. There were no metaphors. It was the nuts and bolts where, yeah, I had signed up to attend Nassau Community College in the fall. It was pretty much the best I could do given the number of classes. I don't even know how I didn't flunk out of high school. Like there's a lot of stuff about my past, my kind of sordid, seamy past. I don't understand a lot of things. The fact that I graduated high school, in the immortal words of Jeffrey Rush in Shakespeare in Love, it's a mystery. It's a mystery. But there were so many different things going wrong at the same time, it almost felt like the plot of a movie where you have a hero who's not very heroic. In my case, the opposite. And I wouldn't even give myself, wasn't even an anti-hero. I was the antagonist of my own story. I created a lot of my own problems, but not all of my own problems. But I didn't know where I was going in every sense. I didn't even know where I was going to live. Was I going to just move in with my dad permanently? Was it going to work out at home in Massapequa with my mom and I at loggerheads? And I had unfortunately gone through, really bad real estate the last number of years. And the only thing that was a mild positive as I graduated high school is I had embraced physical fitness for whatever that's worth. And in my case, I think it was worth a lot. I started my senior year of high school. I was still under 6 feet. I was the kind of kid who I grew steadily. There were certain people who would sprout up 5 inches in a year and then stop growing. I was somebody who I kept growing. I probably added another inch between the beginning of my senior year when I was still 17 and graduation, where I ended up about 6'1 3/4. But I was very overweight when I started my senior year of high school. And there were so many different elements of my life where it felt as if I had no ability to affect any level of control. None. My life was just as if it was run by somebody else or outside forces. I had nothing to do with it. It was just happening. Things were taking place, and I just, I was just to react to whatever the circumstances were that were consuming me. At the beginning of my senior year in high school, I developed a crush on a young lady, and luckily, that motivated me to some degree of action. And I embarked on the beginnings of, if you want to say fitness journey, but the beginnings of a fitness journey, where for the first time, I started to become serious about eating better, getting more exercise. I had a membership at a Lucille Roberts, which is long gone, not far from the Sunrise Mall, if you know the area. It was in not the same parking lot, but it was near the parking lot where there used to be the TGI Fridays, and now there's, the Whole Foods, Olive Garden, that whole range with those shopping centers, the old Toys R Us, whatever. But I began to move towards at least trying to be more healthful physically. Now, I can attest to, in later years, being more healthy physically helped me mentally, emotionally, and psychologically. At this particular time, it really didn't. I simply got smaller. I lost weight. And I guess you could say that I felt better day to day, knowing that I was getting into better shape, that I was starting to resemble more and more the other kids in the grade who looked like that, I guess. It's all very shallow, but when you're a kid, shallow is your middle name, right? You just want to be liked. You hope to be popular, and heaven forbid, if you are attracted to someone, maybe they'll like you back. But a lot of things went wrong. Academically, I was still a disaster. And the personal life was in the toilet because my mother and I, our relationship, which seemed to be on the right track when I was in 11th grade, and I had little bits of success. Please don't judge. Actually, you know what? You can judge. Judge all the fuck you want. It doesn't matter. It's so long ago. But I had success with the high school bowling team. I got to bowl upstate in the state finals. I didn't do that well, but just the fact that I was able to represent the town at the time, it was really cool. Even though I bowled like shit, we really weren't a threat to win. But it was something positive. And then my mom and I just had a lot of issues with a boyfriend, and a whole bunch of things went wrong during my senior year of high school. And you don't want to oversell the idea of letting down parents. There's different ways you can either impress or make feel more whole that, okay, we didn't do a terrible job parenting. But you just don't want to disappoint, even if you're not getting along with a parent or both parents. That's one thing, but you still, on some level, you want to make them proud. You don't want to keep forcing them to facepalm what is wrong with this fucking kid. I mean, unless you're just a troll, but I didn't see myself that way. I wasn't trying to hurt them through my actions. But a lot of things went wrong, and my grades didn't really get much better when I was in 12th grade. I didn't have to take math or science, so it's so stupid. I didn't fail any classes when I was a senior in high school. But I signed up to go to Nassau Community. I don't think that I would have gotten into any college. I'd failed so many classes in 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade. I don't think I would have gotten into Post or Old Westbury. Nassau seemed like the only option. And I didn't know. When you start to fail every class, or almost every class, the expectation is that you're just always going to fail. And as much as people kept reminding me, bro, you're not dumb. You have the best memory of anyone we know. Like, I was already Google before Google when I was 17. But I said, hey, like Davey Johnson used to say, the old Mets manager, and then Bill Parcells kind of jumped on it when he said, you are what your record says you are. So people kept telling me how smart I was. Hey, I can't be that smart if I'm flunking 60% of my classes. That might just make me a fucking idiot, right? How dumb would I have to be to not be able to pass classes like this, whatever it was. So there was the fear and the uncertainty and not knowing what my life was going to be like after high school. And feelings of anxiety and dread are not unusual for young people. And it's sort of teen angst and the flood and cascade of hormones. The TV show Big Mouth obviously gets into that from a much different angle. But with a number of different things which went wrong on my way towards June 28, 1992, it just felt like I was going nowhere, and that graduating high school didn't seem like that big a deal. It wasn't. I mean, yeah, I guess you could say it was a relief, but I fully expected to go to Nassau Community and flunk out. As crazy as that sounds, I just expected to I just expected to fail. And the sort of loser's mindset, it took time, unfortunately, for me to have that loser's mindset. And by this point, the expectation always was, you're not going to be able to do this. You're not going to be able to do this. And I didn't know where I was going to be living, because on June 28, 1992, as much time as I had spent with my father, technically I still lived in Massapequa. And that situation had come to a head. And within a week, I was going to be out of the house permanently. And I was pretty sure that's where it was going, even though it hadn't been said out loud. But I was pretty sure this situation is now, the war is unwinnable. During Walter Cronkite, it looks like the war is unwinnable. By the time I walked with the class of 92, the war was unwinnable. And it was just a question of what exactly is going to happen here. I assume I'm going to live with my dad. I still don't have a driver's license. Also an important factor. If you can't drive, you're limited literally in terms of your movements. It's not that easy to get from, let's just say, Massapequa to Woodbury. There's no Uber in 1992. You'd have to actually just take a cab. Or if you really want to get cute, if you have a monthly pass, which I actually did, but Dad would give me his monthly train ticket when he wasn't using it, just in case. In theory, you could take a train from Massapequa to Jamaica and then take the train from Jamaica back to Syosset. Now, I never had to do that, but it was at least a possibility if I was really up Schitt's Creek, where, spoiler alert, I ended up being up Schitt's Creek a number of times. But there are graduation days which are celebrations. And I was fortunate that 5 years later, not quite 5 years later, when I graduated New York University, that felt like a celebration. Because my parents, although they had long since split up, they were celebrating with me. That was an achievement. I understood. Hey, I could be snarky. I'm Generation X. I'm right in the middle of Gen X. We can be snarky and sarcastic, and we can, piss all over every single accomplishment because nothing fucking matters. I know. But NYU graduation, that was legit. That was a day to celebrate. That was a day to say, hey, I actually did something here. Dad, you spent a lot of money. Thanks for me not getting saddled with loans in 1997, right? We talk about it now, it's a lot worse, but it was still a thing back then. I know a lot of people that got stuck with $200,000 in loans in the mid to late 1990s. But there was so much sadness. My grandfather, my dad's dad, who still had another, and it's so crazy, he had another 18 years of being healthy after I graduated from Massapequa High. He was pushing 80. He was 78 going on 79, and he had another 18 years of good health. So he came down from Florida to see the graduation. And the sadness was that I felt that I let him down, because he and Grandma Irene she had another couple of years, but her health was like she really couldn't travel by that point. But they were the kinds of grandparents who would put my stuff on their refrigerator. If I got an A on a paper, my parents would send it to them. Again, I use the word analog, but mail them something so they could put on their refrigerator. The fact that I had sort of been such a clown and such an underachiever in my latter elementary education days and secondary education days, felt that I'd let them down. My grandfather didn't have any of the socioeconomic advantages that I did. He was pretty good. He went to Monroe High School. He presumably graduated near the top of his class. But with all the advantages I had, allegedly gifted and talented, I graduated 363rd out of a class of 540. And I don't even think it was that high. I think I was in the 400s, and they were just being nice giving me that number. I think my standing went down after that number came out. But it was all really sad and scary. And I don't even know that I would have called it an existential crisis. It was just a series of crisis points taking place at the same time. But I remember, I did have a greater sense of community with many of my classmates. I had done slightly better interacting in a broader sense. And again, I hate to be shallow, But the fact that from a physical standpoint, I now looked like most of the other kids, it helped me in terms of people asking what I was doing on a certain day. Hey, maybe we could go bowling. Here's my phone number. We're having a party tonight at so-and-so's house. So there were doors that had opened, but the most important things I had to crush didn't work out. It wasn't going to work out. And where the hell was I going to be living? Where was I living? Was I just going to be moving to Woodbury? So the graduation, pomp and circumstance, the Randy Savage music is what they used at graduation. Dun, 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 dun. Yeah, we used that. And I'm like, why are they playing the Randy Savage music? I didn't connect that. Bro, this is what they're playing at graduation, you stupid. Yeah, sometimes, actually oftentimes, I was. But I did not have any sense of accomplishment that day. It was just a sense of sadness for the things that had gone wrong and I thought would always go wrong. And it is a thing, and it's why when a young person seems to be complaining a lot, I have a lot of patience, because I was there. I was that scared kid. And I always tell people, you just keep your nose to the grindstone and just hope it will get better. Hope that things will improve. Just try to survive. Sometimes that is the best you can do, is to just try to survive. Or as my mother would say, just put one foot in front of the other, Jay. Just put one foot in front of the other. That's the best we can do. Too often, I would argue, but sometimes it's for sure the best thing that we can do. But there are moments in life where things feel like they were just meant to be one way or the other. And I was meant to struggle, but ultimately I was meant to surmount the struggle. When I look, until I reached really well into my 40s, and I used to look back at what my younger self went through, and I used to get angry. I used to get angry because there were areas of my life that I know I could have done more, I could have done better, and I didn't. And I would be angry, and I would say if I could see that stupid kid I was, sometimes I'd say, well, beat the shit out of him. That's great. Beat the shit out of yourself. Who was that relief pitcher of the Astros in 2018? I forgot the guy's name. He gave up a home run to Gary Sanchez, and on his way off the mound, the manager took him out of the game, and he started punching himself in the face. I mean, that's one of the great moments, right? He's punching himself in the face. Well, I imagine me in my 40s, throwing a couple of shots at that little whiner 17-year-old me. But the intervening years have given me a different perspective. And I see my younger self as a more sympathetic figure, because, I created a lot of my own problems. There was a lot of shit that went wrong that I had nothing to do with. There were circumstances way beyond my control. And I get that now. And I just feel bad that the kid that I was went through what he went through. And I used to think I was really weak because I felt weak. But I wasn't that weak, because those circumstances could have destroyed me, and they didn't. It took me time. It took me way too much time. But eventually, I got my feet under me, and I began to make some headway. By the time I got to Nassau Community, I didn't have the same exact loser's mindset. Once I sat in on the classes, I said, wait a minute, these classes are all easy. What was I worried about? They're not looking to flunk people out of this community college. They're looking to encourage you to do well here, to go to a 4-year school. So the negative mindset, my personal life, I still didn't have one. I still had the social anxiety disorder. It was almost impossible for me to interact properly with someone. But at least academically, I began to do some work. I began to see this is not difficult. You don't have any excuses anymore. It's time for you to do some work. It's time for you to get some good grades and stop complaining about that you can't. Stop using the word can't. Just do it. The old Nike ads, there's a lot to be said for the just do it concept. Just buckle down, do some work, and let's see where we can go from here. But what I remember about June 28th is that after the graduation ceremony, there was a party at the house of somebody that I was, casually acquainted with, a classmate, a friend. And there was something beautiful about the kind of last night, if you will, because high school was over, and the classes had been over for 2.5 weeks. The last day of regular classes was like, June 11th or 12th or something. But to have this idea of a last party, and the irony is, I never really went to any of those kind of house parties that would crop up that we would hear about at school, let's say on a Friday, so-and-so, their parents are away. Again, cliche alert, but it happened more often than you would think, that you would have these sort of parties where they would bring out keggers and people would be going nuts and maybe snort a little bit of helium and just, laughing gas, whatever the case might be. I didn't see any laughing gas anywhere that I went, or actually I never saw a keg in person, funnel, nothing. But this last night, it just felt like an ending. It didn't feel like a new beginning, where when I got out of NYU, I said, okay, now I have a new life where I'm no longer a student. Now I'm a writer. Now let's just see where we can go and what we can do from here. The last night, though, June 28th, party didn't break up until the police were called, because it was a Sunday. If it was a Saturday night, I don't think there'd be people waking up for work. And I remember after the party broke up, and I didn't drink. Most people were really putting them down. And I'm not opposed to the idea of drinking, but I really wasn't much of a drinker then, like almost never. Alcohol just seemed to fuck up my stomach. You could say I got lucky that I can't tolerate it. If I have more than an ounce of beer, my stomach just starts doing all kinds of somersaults. It doesn't agree with me. I accept that. But I remember when I walked back home, there was this feeling of, there was a little bit of relief, because I thought maybe I wasn't even going to graduate. But the fear of ending and a new beginning where I just didn't know where I was going, what I was doing. And looking back on that, it almost feels like it was more than 33 years ago. It feels like it happened to someone else in another timeline. But it was me. And ironically, because it was a Sunday, I didn't really sleep much. I slept maybe an hour. And I got up and got myself to Massapequa train station, and I took the train into the city to my father's office, and I met Dad, and then went home with him. And then things at home continued to kind of spiral downward in Massapequa. I didn't spend maybe more than another week in Pequa before that situation came to a final unfortunate ending. But that was disastrous at the time, but it ended up being, unfortunately, what needed to happen. But I wish I had better memories of graduating from high school. I wish I could say it was a good day. It was a very scary and sad, and a word that I like to use, which can mean different things depending on how you say it, elegiac. Sort of like in a tapestry of a life, in certain people's lives, high school graduation is something to look back on and smile. I can look back on it and smile, but only insofar as I got better. My life got better. Not right away, but slowly. And this is the thing, when you're a kid, you don't have any patience. The older I've gotten, the more patience that I have developed. Everything with me was slower than it should have been. I matured very slowly. My social life I didn't really connect with people until, even at NYU, I had friends, but I was still staring at the ground most of the time. A girl smiles at me and I'm staring at the ground. Jerry, you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Why are you looking at the ground? What do you mean? Slowly, slow and steady, Slow and steady doesn't necessarily win the race, but slow and steady is better than standing still or, heaven forbid, retreating. Because I did a lot of retreating, but at a certain point, I was just able to make incremental progress. And I certainly don't look down on education. And I'm glad whatever chicanery took place that allowed me to graduate high school, fucking, I'm happy I didn't have to go to summer school to get a diploma. My academic life continued. I did really well at Nassau. I mean, I could, again, be snarky and say it was fucking bullshit. It was easy. I'm not going to say it was bullshit. It was easy. I actually graduated Nassau with a 3.9. I mean, that's good, but New York University, spoiler alert, I ended with a 3.71. And that is something that I'll pat myself on the back for, because they did not give the diplomas out. Yeah, you were probably going to graduate, but you still had to do some work. They weren't looking to flunk people, at least the program I took where we mostly wrote papers. It's a little bit different if you just take tests and you get a 30 or a 40 out of 100 on a final exam, you're in trouble. But writing papers, you had a lot of latitude, and they were encouraging creativity. They just weren't looking to flunk people. But graduating Massapequa is part of my existence. And it was June 28th, 1992. It was a very warm day, but it was not humid. That's what I remember, standing outside on the lawn at Farmingdale. I don't think I'd ever been to SUNY Farmingdale before that day, but standing out there and not sweating, even though it had to be in the low 80s. You know, you think about June 20th, we just had this freaking heat wave. I'm glad it wasn't 97 with massive humidity that day. But all these years later, I can smile and think of that kid that I was and say, he survived. He toughed it out. He managed to springboard slowly into better things. My life wasn't always going to be the disaster, every day waking up afraid, for a lot of different reasons. Eventually, I did find a stable home, another cliche, a stable home with my dad, even though we were in an apartment, nice apartment, Woodbury, nice spot. There just wasn't enough room and very, very thin walls. The neighbors also they weren't very nice. They're always yelling at me to shut up and get us this stupid shit. It's kind of stuff. You do it now, like a 50-year-old and a 50-year-old yelling at each other that somebody's making too much noise, right? Imagine that. No, I can't. Not now. 33 years. I could say that I can't believe it, but I can't believe it's only 33 years. It really does feel like it happened to someone else, another lifetime, another timeline. But I know that it did happen to me. I've got pictures to prove it. And I'm just grateful that things could have gotten worse and gone worse, and they didn't. I caught a series of lucky breaks, and here I am, living on my own